I remember the plates more than the words. White ceramic, a little chipped at the edges. My mother always used the same set at Christmas. The turkey sat in the center of the table like a centerpiece nobody actually wanted to talk about. What people really wanted to talk about was me. Someone asked how my internet thing was going. They didn't mean it unkindly. At least, not at first. I explained the project the same way I'd explained it a dozen times before, slowly, trying to make it sound less strange than it probably was. Data licensing, niche analytics, a small platform that helped companies interpret obscure market signals. It sounded complicated even to me. My uncle chuckled halfway through the explanation. "Let me guess," he said. "Crypto or something like that." A few people laughed. I shook my head. My cousin leaned back in his chair. "So when do you get a real paycheck?" More laughter. It wasn't cruel. Not exactly, but it had that tone people use when they've already decided the answer. My dad didn't laugh, but he gave the same look he always did when I talked about it. The one that said he was waiting for the phase to pass. My aunt said it gently. "You're smart," she told me. "You could do something stable." Someone else joked that I'd be back home in 6 months asking for a job referral. Another said, "You'll never make real money doing that." That line got the biggest laugh of the night. I smiled the way people do when they're trying not to turn a moment into a scene. I cut another piece of turkey and nodded like they were probably right. At the time I wasn't sure they were wrong. The year after that dinner wasn't dramatic. No big turning points. No inspirational breakthroughs. Just long days where nothing seemed to happen. Most of my work happened alone. Screens, spreadsheets, endless trial and error. Weeks where the numbers didn't move. Months where the platform barely had users. Sometimes I thought about that dinner table more than I wanted to. Not the jokes themselves. The certainty behind them. There's something powerful about people confidently assuming you'll fail. It seeps in. There were nights I almost shut the whole thing down. But the data kept telling me something interesting. Small signals, tiny patterns that companies didn't know how to interpret yet. So I kept working, quietly. The deal itself happened in a strangely boring moment. No celebration, no dramatic call. Just an email confirming that the acquisition agreement had finalized. I refreshed the banking screen 3 times before the number looked real. 2,700,000. I stared at it for a long time. The room was silent. My apartment looked exactly the same as it had the day before. Success, when it finally arrives, doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels quiet. The phone calls started 2 days later. First my cousin. He hadn't called me in almost a year. He sounded cheerful. "Saw the news about your company. Man, that's incredible." Then he mentioned how families should celebrate wins together. A day later my aunt called. She said she always believed I'd figure something out. Then she mentioned some financial stress they were going through. My uncle texted next, "Proud of you," followed by, "Hey, quick question." The messages multiplied. People who had barely spoken to me suddenly had warm memories of supporting me. Some of them didn't even pretend. One cousin said it directly. "Look, we're family. It would mean a lot if you helped out." It wasn't aggressive. But it carried an assumption that my success had somehow become communal property. A week later my mother suggested we all get together. "Just dinner," she said. "The same house, the same table." When I walked in, everyone was unusually friendly. Too friendly. People asked about the business with a kind of careful admiration that hadn't existed before. The conversation circled the topic without touching it directly. Eventually someone said it. "We're all proud of you." A pause followed. Then my uncle leaned forward slightly. "You know, family always takes care of each other." Several heads nodded. I let the silence sit for a moment. Not because I was angry, but because I had already made the decision weeks earlier, long before the calls started. I actually wanted to mention something. I said. They looked relieved, Like the conversation was finally moving in the direction they expected. I structured everything after the deal closed. I continued. A few people exchanged glances. Most of the money is locked into long-term investments and a foundation tied to the work we built. What do you mean locked? My cousin asked. Legally committed, I said calmly. The contracts were finalized right after the acquisition. My aunt frowned. So you can't access it. I can, I said. But it's allocated. The structure makes withdrawals like that impossible without dissolving the agreements. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I just explained the reality. The room went quiet. Not angry quiet, confused quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when people realize a conversation they thought was open actually isn't. My uncle leaned back slowly. Well, he said after a moment, that's responsible. My cousin nodded, though he didn't look convinced. Someone changed the subject. 2. Dinner ended earlier than usual. Not dramatically. Just sooner. People hugged goodbye. The tone was polite. But something had shifted. On the drive home I realized the calls had already started slowing down. Not disappearing completely. Just becoming normal again. Less enthusiastic, less hopeful. What surprised me most wasn't the disappointment. It was the clarity. For years I had worried about whether my work meant anything, whether the risk had been foolish. But sitting at that table again, I understood something else. Respect that appears only after success isn't really respect. It's recognition. And those are two very different things. I didn't feel triumphant, just settled. The number in my account hadn't changed who I was. But it had made something invisible finally obvious. And sometimes that's worth more than the money itself.